calls them moths. Except for he does an exception for some kinds, like those ones are okay. Anyway, so today's about diurnal moths of Washington State. The purpose of this is the inspiration is that on our field trips we find a lot of day-flying moths, and a lot of people go, oh, moth, and they leave it at that. So what I'm hoping tonight is to hear a lot of, oh, that's what that was. Or invariably on the Pomona website, which I'll talk about a little later, that Maureen mentioned, I'll get photos of these day-flying moths. Hey, I found this butterfly, I cannot find it in the field guide. It's a moth. So, as you can see in this drawing that someone made on the internet, as an old butterfly, which I'm sure they meant to draw. You see no clubs on the antenna. That's a moth that they drew. So, people ask, well, then what's the difference between moths and butterflies? Well, butterflies fly during the day and moths at night is one of the most commonly held beliefs, correct? Wrong. We have lots of day-flying moths, of which I'm going to go through the majority of them. I focused on those that we are most likely to see. There are some that I left out because they're just simply too rare. They've been seen in Washington 1 or 2 times. It's like, I don't really want to put that on your radar tonight. Also, it just would make it, I'd be here until 10. But here's ignore the Latin, unless you're interested, in which case read the Latin. But this is basically the phylogenetic tree of butterflies, of Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths. Notice that all these moths, and here are the butterflies down here. So really, when I'm talking about the day-flying moths, I really should be throwing in all the butterflies too, because they are moths. They didn't emerge from the moths. As Pelham said, they're the sexy daytime moths. Basically, they traded in their sense of smell for better eyesight, a little bit more color. But there's some obvious exceptions. You guys can come up and see some of my specimens of some day flyers up here a little later. So day flying is not unique to the butterflies that we know. It has, most of these families have their diurnal representatives. So day flying has emerged independently in pretty much all the groups numerous times. Nothing that the butterflies do is really special in that regard. So, one of the reasons why I say let's pay attention to the diurnal moths, because usually people, when they get into, say, wildlife watching, they might get into birds first, right? At least the majority. There's some exceptions in here, notably myself. I went to birds afterward. But some people might start with birds. Most people might start with birds. And they say, well, okay, my learning curve is starting to plateau. I'd like to pick up something else to really get challenging. And they pick up butterflies because they're very colorful. They're day flying, fly during favorable field trip conditions. But then there's kind of this void afterwards. What next? What's next? And there's numerous possibilities that people go to. Some people go dragonflies. Some people go bees. Some people go, what else have you guys done?
Snails and slugs.
Slugs, people go with mushrooms in this region, all kinds of things. And I say, why not moths? And a lot of people say, well, there's too many of them. We have 3,000, and they're all brown. I say, well, okay, well then let's divvy it up a little bit. Why not day-flying moths? Because we'll have representatives from just about every family in Washington. So you get to know what a noctuid is, what a geometrid is, what a sphinget is, what a saturnid is, but you don't have to learn every single one of them, so it's a little bit better. I'm asking you to basically add about 100 species to your day-flying Lepidoptera repertoire. So you already got 150 or so with the butterflies. I'm asking you to add another 100 to this. That's a number you can wrap your head around rather than 3,000 moths, which is about what we have in Washington. But, say, why butterflies in the first place? Why moths? Well, we often say nothing that really captures the imagination like them. I mean, you see she's holding an elegant day moth down here, so she likes it just as much as she would a butterfly. And in that process, you get to see all the other animals, all the other bees, pollinating flies, beetles, all their predators and stuff like that. So I've always called butterflies the gateway bug. And I think we can extend that, if we want, to day-flying moths. So let's first talk about what we're not talking about tonight. So we're not talking about the flush night flyers. As you're walking through the grass, as you're walking through the shrubs, the habitat, and you startle up some moths that are normally night flying, they're going to get stepped on, they're going to fly. So we're not going to be talking about those because those can happen just about any time. Now, I'd say the Drastaria genus is one that's kind of on the borderline. These guys flush so easily, it could almost be called day flying.
What was that genus?
Drastaria.
Drastaria.
Yes, they're called underwing moths, and they're in the Noctuidae. Not the Catoccolas that are so famous in the East Coast. That we have just a few of here. But these ones are much more common, but they're very easy to flush, and you will see them on your field trips a lot. In fact, you usually see them often puddling with butterflies, but we'll talk about that next slide. So we're not talking about ones that flush just to get out of your way. We're talking about ones that are active during the daytime, seek mates during the daytime, nectar during the daytime, breed during the daytime, lay eggs during the daytime. Their life cycle is around the sun. So nor are we talking about the occasional day flyers, what I'm calling facultative. So when I think about the occasional day flyers, I remember one day down Derby Canyon Road with a field trip on Chumstick Mountain, and I saw dozens of this one, the Barberry geometer, flying around the lower part of the road. This is normally a night flyer, and I've never seen it do this before, so I have no idea why it was doing it that day. It was a cloudy day, I went for butterflies. Was it because maybe the cloudy was tricking them into, it was kind of that crepuscular behavior, perhaps? Was it that maybe there was some females calling that made the males just say, forget it, time to find a mate? I really don't know what was going on that particular day, but I've never seen that before. But that might trick me into saying, oh, the Barberry geometer is totally a day flyer. Well, it's the only time I've ever seen it happen. So we're not talking about what I'm calling the facultative day flyers. I don't know what made them do that day, but they did. And then so I'll include that with the Drastarias, because sometimes you will see them puddling with the butterflies, but you don't see it all the time. So I'm saying, that was one that maybe just needed some salts that day and decided it was warm enough. I'm talking about the ones that are strictly diurnal and mostly diurnal. Anyway, so I had some trouble as far as how do I split all this up? Do I break it up taxonomically? Do we do the silk moths first, then the sphinx moths, then the geometers, then the noctuids? And I'm thinking, that's a little boring for us. Let's go through the year. So I'm going to go like, what moths are we going to see at the very beginning of the year and tail it all the way to the very end? And I think that way we might be able to associate it with some of our favorite field trips and trails, because that might more spur memories for us. Oh, that's where I've seen that critter. So we'll start with spring. So what conditions do we usually think of when we think of spring and our butterflies?
Occasional rain.
Occasional rain. So they got to be flexible. They got to be able to take some hard weather. They got to be able to predict spring correctly, especially these very early for us, because if they get it wrong, just like say our echo blue, they die. They cannot survive the frozen temperatures. So they got to be very good at predicting what time they come out. It's not like the more dependable summer flyers who, to be honest, once you hit July, it's pretty good, except this year was a little bit iffy. Anyway, so no exception with our first one there, and I apologize, there's going to be a lot of Latin today because they're the moths and unfortunately haven't been looked at, so they don't have a lot of really good names for them yet. So a lot of them are still known just by their Latin names, although those that are getting common names are getting some pretty cool common names because the people that really like are getting really creative with them. Anyway, so we'll start with Epper, Hoey, Play Big. Someone get some common names, please. So I say this is a very early flyer. It's been seen in February. An avid flower visitor, so if it's around, you will see it on, like, say, the first year's dandelions, things like that. Hosts include Gallium species. This is where I say it's really important for us to look at these day-flying moths because we don't look at them as much as butterflies, and their ranges are not well known. So this is very commonly found, say, down Columbia Gorge, east slopes of the Cascades, where a lot of our butterfly trips are held. But there's been just a couple of records in urban Puget Sound parks. Just a couple. Are those flukes, introductions, or their actual populations that we are just not paying attention to? So how widespread is this thing? We really don't know yet, because nobody's really paying attention to it.
What family did you say?
So this is would that help if I said what family it is?
Yes.
So this is a geometrid. So geometrids are often called the butterfly moths, and that they have very butterfly-like proportions to their wings versus the body. Only difference really is, I mean, if you were to slap some knobs on the end of that antenna, you'd say that's a butterfly. Say that's a lycetid, is what you'd say. Or maybe a small brush foot. But geometrids are also the inchworms. So inchworms are fairly easy to remember as far as what family they belong to. So while Eperhoe might be among the first to emerge, this is definitely the moth equivalent of the echoazores. So everyone has seen this from time to time. I mean, it's small. This is another geometrid. The western white ribbon carpet Mesoluca graculata. So this is the moth equivalent of its springtime. Just like if you see the echoazore, it's springtime. You see the morning cloak? Not necessarily springtime. Morning cloak can go right back into hibernation if it needs to. But if you see this one, as an adult, cannot survive winter temperatures, so it has to predict the occurrence of spring with precision. Otherwise, it dies.
Is this a geometrid?
This is another geometrid.
They're pretty small, aren't they?
They're very small, but we're talking like inch and a half or so.
I'm sure we see them.
They're pretty tiny, but yeah, come February, start looking for them. Come March, you'll be seeing them. I have not seen them nectaring often. So another one that flies with the western white ribbon carpet moth is Encoria lacteata. This is another geometrid. You're seeing the geometrids are definitely make up a large role of the day flyers, a large portion of the day flyers. So this is an early season. It's more of a woodland moth, whereas the previous one you'd see flying in suburban gardens. I see this where you might find some woodlands. So often flies with graculata, but it is definitely the wary of the two. I can easily get pictures of graculata, easily. Use John Davis's photo because I have not been able to get a picture of this guy yet. They're extremely wary, so you approach within 5 feet of them, they're gone. I mean, if you approach within 5 feet and too quickly, they're gone. So hosts include miner's lettuce. So you see a woodland, you know they have miner's lettuce there. Look for this guy. Come March, should be finding him. So we have another 2 spring flyers. One is called the infant. It's an avid nectar and puddler. More commonly, say oak woodlands, Columbia Gorge area, east slopes of the Cascades. We also have this one called the scarce infant. I don't really talk about it individually because it is scarce. But it is so distinctive, I figured it warrants included in this talk. But it's more so of a northeastern Washington, so not likely for us to see on our day trips. It just gets too far. I mean, given that it's in here, given it is a day flyer, given it's so distinct, I threw it in here anyway. But it's called the scarce infant for a reason.
And what family was that?
These are both geometrids again. Don't worry, I'm going to start throwing in some diversity in the family. But these are the early season flyers, where they're all pretty much geometrids. Another geometrid, for example. So this is the bluish spring moth, bluish. And I'll see it with echoazores. This I photographed up at Lake 22 in the company of other echo blues. And my first thought was, that butterfly's holding its wings kind of weird. Oh, never mind. It's a moth. Oftentimes when it is puddling or nectaring, it will have its wings up like a butterfly, in which case you're going to look for that bluish gray color, as well as the 2 black spots, 1 in each wing. So Lepartia californiae. No common name yet, at least none that I found. An extremely variable moth. These are all from the same population. So not regional or anything like that. Early season flyer. Lars Krabar, our regional moth expert, says they do not visit flowers, but I have seen them puddling. This is one that I found whenever we take our trip to Cowiche Canyon. I see lots of these. So we usually visit Cowiche mid-April to early May. You'd see these guys. This is our first one that's not a geometrid. This is a tiger moth. This is an arctiid.
Are they gray or brown?
Largely gray.
Okay.
The colors on my computer screen are not too far off, actually. They're not too far off. So, as well as other early season species, we have these 4 Anophylla species that have been recorded in Washington. They're tiny. So one of the things, have any of you visited the Pacific Northwest Moths website yet? Do it. Do it. There's a plethora of information. These are noctuids. These are our first noctuids of the presentation. One thing I love about the photos that Merrill Peterson's put on there is he puts a scale. Each of these bars is 1 centimeter. So you see how tiny these guys are. Look at this guy. 1 centimeter. So you got 2 centimeters wingspan. I mean, you're talking tiny little moths. Luckily, they fly during the day, so they're easy for us to see, as well as they're avid nectars. So just because they're small doesn't mean you shouldn't ignore them. They can make for some very cool sights. And I do think these are under-recorded. I was on the Tumwater Pipeline Trail near Leavenworth. I swear I saw multiple of the diva, the white one here. But according to the records, it doesn't go any farther north than the Columbia Gorge. So I'm thinking, what did I see? Did some of the western white ribbon carpet moths fool me, or was I actually seeing what I thought I saw? So this is one where we need to get out early in the season. We need to be looking for these tiny little moths because we just do not know their ranges yet.
David, along that lines, if we find one, then do we take a picture and send it to?
I will get to the
Okay.
one at the very, very end. But yes. So we're talking about looking for them. Absolutely take photos of them, because I'm going to tell you what to do with those photos to help us understand their ranges a little bit more. Surprising that such a distinctive moth does not have a common name, but it's Litocala sexsignata. We should just call it the 6-spotted owlet or something like that, right? Because I mean that's what the Latin name means, 6 spots. This is an early spring flyer of southern Washington mostly, so it feeds on oaks. So you're going to be looking more Columbia Gorge, but we go to some places like Snow Mountain Ranch has some oak habitat. We've gone to Oak Creek, it has some oak habitat. So, however, mostly this one flies in March, April. So I mean, if we went, it might be the only one we saw that day. I looked at all the records available on the Pacific Northwest Moths website. They're old records. They're like pre-70s. So who knows if this thing still lives, but nobody's looking, or at least if anyone's looking, no one's reporting. So this is one that we would definitely want to go look at, but it's we'll go look for. But it's one that will take nectar from, say, the catkins on the willows. But that tells you how early it flies. Blooms with the willows. So how many of you have seen this one before in the woodlands? This is another very common one I get lots of photos of. Says, what butterfly is this? I'm not seeing it. This is one that, so in Pyle's book, you guys know at the very back it says honorary butterflies. And that's an insult to moths. They should be called, they said the butterflies should be called the sexy moths. Anyway, so spearmark black is noted as an honorary butterfly, and that it flies with the butterflies, it nectars, it puddles, it does everything that a butterfly would do, it just doesn't have the knobs on the antenna. This is another geometrid. I say common, I should say very common. It's at home in the smallest of woodland edges to all the way up the subalpine meadows. Suburban to wilderness doesn't seem to care. There are 2 species in our state. We have subhastata and hastata. You cannot distinguish it from photographs. You have to dissect it and look at the genitalia. For example, we have 2 specimens of hastata on the left, 5 of subhastata. Please tell me if you can spot the difference, because I'd rather not dissect every single one that I find. It's painstaking work.
So how do you know that those are?
I'm trusting the internet, which you know how dangerous that is.
Yeah.
So these are from the Canadian Biodiversity Information Facility. I'm guessing, just a guess, that they photographed them and then dissected them and afterwards. That's my guess. So they wanted the full specimen. I prefer a photograph of it and the abdomen is cut off that says, "Hey, you did the work and you know." But that's how we're going to figure out exactly where these are. I'm not suggesting we all get into dissecting genitalia. Trust me, it's not all that fun. I have an idea. I have a hypothesis to, hey, you did the work and you know. But that's how we're going to figure out exactly where these are. I'm not suggesting we all get into dissecting genitalia. Trust me, it's not all that fun. I have an idea. I have a hypothesis to where hastata lives and subhastata lives. Hastata's been the only one recorded of these two up in Alaska. And as we know with the Arctic blue butterfly goes all the way up to Alaska, and it's down at sea level because the climactic conditions are met all the way down to sea level. It's not here, so it has to go up higher. So I'm thinking that hastata maybe does the same thing. That hastata is a high elevation one, and then in the lower elevations you have subhastata. So subhastata by and far has been the one most commonly identified via dissections. It's the one we have most commonly here. But we just don't know where hastata is or is not. But I have yet to, I have a dozen specimens of these from the tip top of some mountains that I plan on dissecting this winter when it just continually rains and I can't do anything outside. But, so at the very least, if you see this, the spear marked black, named for the little arrows pointing out into black there, you know at least it is a Rhumaptera species. Don't know which one yet, but you know what genus you got. Yeah, see, there's a good common name. The white striped black. So this combined with the spear marked black and the western white ribbon carpet, those are like the trio of woodland moths you'll find in just about any hike in western Washington with some woodland openings. Always kind of welcome because they'll fly in the shade where most butterflies won't. This will definitely be the least common of them. It's also the smallest. It's also the hardest to follow. You'd think that would really give it away for birds. It's really tough to follow when it's flitting in and out of the sun and the shadows, sun and shadows. Kind of that light and dark really makes it hard to follow in those conditions. I'm guessing that there's some benefit to being this black-white coloration and living in woodlands. So I say at home in woodland habitats across western Washington. Seen it a couple times on east slopes, but not nearly as common as, say, western Washington hikes. And I'm not giving you any specific spots because you go into western Washington, you're going to find this moth. I almost called it a butterfly.
Know anything about its host plants?
Not this one. Now, whether that means it's unknown, I don't know. But apparently, I thought it was not worthy to note. It's probably my fault more than anyone's. All right. So moving back from white and black, we're getting into some. So here you go. There's another really creative common name, the red-winged wave. Probably named for the sinuous black lines throughout the wings. The only description of its habitat is wet forests. But it does seem to just be uncommonly recorded, so we don't have much to go on off of as far as for its habitat. I find them most often on east slopes of the forest in late spring. So you're talking mid-May or so, and they'll be especially puddling with the butterflies. Probably the spot I find them most commonly is Derby Canyon. That's where I really find them with the butterflies puddling along those roadside seeps. So this is definitely one to watch out for because it's just uncommonly recorded. Yet I find it reliably enough, I'm thinking it's probably out there, but it's not recording it. This is another geometrid. These have all been geometrids, noctuid. Okay, so you're seeing most of the dayflyers so far have been geometrids, the itchworms. They're good, definitely make up a large proportion of the spring flyers. That's another geometrid. So we have a group of, has anyone ever seen the bright green moths come to their deck lights? Bathroom and campgrounds, yeah, they're called emeralds. It's a great name. They're this brilliant emerald green, but they're all night flyers except for one, the aptly named day emerald. That's a really good nickname, a really good common name.
David?
What's up?
We saw some at Chumstick. Are these the same ones we saw?
You would see them at Chumstick? The other place I see them really commonly is mid-May. You go to the Menashtash Road. We do that Menashtash, let's see, Dur Canyon Road, Tannum Creek Falls area. Find them a lot out there.
How big are these?
These are about
Tiny.
an inch and a half or so. They're tiny. They're pretty small, but they usually land wings open like this when they go to puddle. So I say most commonly on the east slopes, although there are also some old records from the islands, from the San Juan Islands, from Vancouver Island. So there might still be some scattered colonies out there as well. But if you want to see this moth, just wait until we go to Menashtash Ridge or Tannum Creek Canyon and you'll see them. All right, so we're going to keep going with butterflies. Moths that look superficially similar to butterflies. So we have the cerulean looper. It's a bluish moth that flies with our blue butterflies, same time of the year. So once again, you're thinking, man, as if there weren't enough blue butterflies already, we got to add this one into the mix. It uses some of the same hosts too, as far as vetches and peas, Lethyra species. But the way to tell it apart is not just, you don't have to get so close to see its unknobbed antenna. Just look for these two subapical black marks. And that's characteristic of the genus
China, I would say.
Common names are great. Common names are great. But whichever one of the three pronunciations you heard just now, use that one. So, but those two subapical black spots are typical of that genus. And there will be another one that is this color as well. So this is a Western Washington moth. So you're going to find it down, say mid-May, with a lot of the butterflies, down in the Willamette Valley, Puget Prairies, places like that. The dark ribboned wave. Kind of a grainy picture right now just because it was taken from a far way away, but mostly I find it puddling. Most often find it in ponderosa meadows, to riparian habitat within sage steppes. So east slopes of the mountains really is where I find most of them. Larval host is totally unknown. It's been admitted in the books. If we don't know it, I can't find any records on it. So one where we definitely have to watch, but man, this one is tiny. You're talking like barely an inch. Barely an inch, if an inch at all. But a gorgeous, gorgeous moth. They have like this burgundy, a little bit of orange, some blue, and icy colors mixed in there. One to look for if you're on these slopes and it's and you see puddling butterflies, look for this one in there. Talking mid-May to June. Did I see a hand up over there? No. Oh, no. Okay, cool. All right, getting into some more good common name moths. Black banded orange Epelus truncataria. Another one that, much like the dark ribbon wave, is going to be open ponderosa forest, avid puddler, less commonly found, but one that is definitely worth a look at because that is striking. Also very tiny, unfortunately.
Still the geometric.
Geometrid. This is a noctuid. I keep forgetting that rule. But if you guys find it helpful, I'll keep doing it. Geo, yep. Most of these are geos so far. All right. One of my favorite day-flying moths is that fairies do exist.
Yes.
But once again, think small. Think smaller than the previous two I was talking about. These guys are among the micro moths. They're in their own little family. They're called the Adelidae, or the fairy moths. We have 3, maybe 4 species in Washington. Everyone ever been to Dog Mountain down in the Columbia Gorge? Known for its wildflower displays. You go there in May, you're going to see fairy moths. You're going to see more than one species of fairy moth. And there could be, maybe the 4th one does exist there. John Davis has kind of been working on that. So, why are they called fairies? Anyone know why they're called fairies? Anyone ever seen these guys in action?
Yes.
So, I heard a yes.
Yeah, they just kind of hover.
They hover, and the males lek.
The males.
Oh,
Does anyone know what a lek is?
Yes.
So a lek, kind of like, elk rut, sage grouse, where basically all the males get together, strut their stuff, and the females come through and choose. The males lek. just like other species do. And the males have huge eyes. If you ever get to like Bug Guide or something like that, look up at Delids, the males have huge eyes in order to find each other to do this when they just float up and down, just like you see some of those gnats do or the mayflies do in woods where they just go up and down. They do this all in a group.
Where have you seen that?
So I've seen, the first time I saw them was on east slopes of the Cascades, and that's where I usually see them, Easton Ridge, the Cachise Ridge hike. This is May, June when the balsam root's blooming. But then I was really surprised to find it down in Magnuson Park. I see so few spots, I see so few records of this on the map, and yet when I found the first ones and I started looking, you find them a lot of places. Magnuson Park right down there. They're there.
I've seen them outside of Yelm.
What's that?
Outside of Yelm is where I saw them.
Outside of Yelm. Yeah, they're in the butterfly garden. Go figure. Butterfly garden down there is getting real shrubby, but that's where I find them, is very shrubby places. And so they do, one of their confirmed hosts are ocean spray. And so shortly before it blooms is when you're looking for them. Not only do the males have larger eyes, they also have much longer antennae. You're talking 3 times the forwing length. And when they fly, you see these giant antennae just dragging behind. You think, how could that possibly be comfortable? Females have antennae about 1.5 times the forwing length, and they usually have these little orange, they're little redheads. They're little redheads. So, just in case you're wondering how small these guys actually are, that's a thimbleberry leaf. So, well, how big a thimbleberry leaf is, like, there it is.
You can see how lots of
That's a girl. That's a girl. You see the little redhead. Now, I was treated. I went to just this past spring. I went to the Leavenworth, the Tumwater Botanical Area, right outside of Leavenworth. And that's where I took this picture. So there's a male next to a female. You see the difference in antenna size. On one of these, Stuart, would you call this a cinquefoil?
Well, it does look like a cinquefoil, but I don't see enough of it
Looks
to
like a
identify.
saxifrage.
What?
Or I don't. It
That's
wasn't
the
a
Bramble
saxifrage.
Callus, the sticky cinquefoil.
I think it might be that one. One plant, 30 of them. So I was expecting them. They were doing this in a light rain.
About what altitude was that?
I mean, it's just outside of Leavenworth. I had to climb maybe only 200 feet from Highway 2, about 2 miles outside of Leavenworth. So I don't know.
Right by Leavenworth, that's fine.
Yeah.
And what time of year are these out?
So I'd say May. I mean, once you've hit mid-June, you're getting too late. But they, with their host plant, one of their host plants being confirmed as ocean spray, they go just before the buds actually break open into flower, because that's where they lay their eggs on it. That's where they lay their eggs, is the buds of the ocean spray. I'm sure they have more hosts than just that, but that's one confirmed host. All right, we're still thinking small here. So you see how small, like there's our plastic viewing jar. There it is. I mean, so I appreciate the photography in some of these guys can get. This is from a family of moths called the metal mark moths. So we don't just have metal mark butterflies, we do have metal mark moths, and they often are bedazzled in, shiny metallic scales, iridescent scales. So this is Tevena gemmalis. No common name yet. Primarily east slope, late spring, so when we take our Menashtas trip, tiny, tiny little things, but they're there. I took this photo on a Wapa trip, but there it is. You notice it's on a yarrow plant. You can see the individual little flowers. That's how tiny they are. All right. Has your mind been blown yet and said, okay, maybe I'm going to get into these day flying moths, or is it tough? I mean, there's not a guide out there is the problem. It's like there's all these butterfly guides, and then there's only a couple of moth guides. And in the moth guide is all these day flyers. I'm kind of thinking maybe like a guide to Washington day flyers might be in order. Just to, one species, something like that. All right, so now we get into like the big guys. We get into the sphinx moths. So we have Clark's day sphinx for a reason. I have yet to find this one. I've been in the habitat, I've been at the plant. They love currants as far as nectaring on them. There's been sitting there mid-May, right by a current, just waiting. I know this is the habitat. I know it's been recorded right here before, and this is the one that eludes me. And then I'll get a report the next day that someone found it. All right. So we're getting late spring now. We're moving into, say, late May, early June is when this one flies. So Willamette Valley in Oregon, also open forest, east slopes of the Cascades. So two very different areas, but just so long as it seems that it's open and hot. Seems like it gets up to the Puget Prairies, you just a bit too cold at that point. It's open, just a bit too cold.
Can you say something about the variation from green to whatever we'll call that gray, whatever on the
Sure.
forest?
So this is, so Marius took this one, this was fresh out of the chrysalis. And it still retains some green, but yeah, it gets to kind of a gray, but hindwing is always marked with that bright orange hindwing, kind of like an underwing moth. But dayflyer does nectar avidly at plants, and from what I've seen on photos and heard from eyewitness accounts, they love currants, although you see that one's on a balsam root. All right, the yellow-banded day sphinx, I really think they just call it the bumblebee sphinx, because that is a superb bumblebee mimic, is it not? So it's classified as uncommon to rare, although my question is, does this actually reflect reality, or is it a mistaken identity? Is one of the problems. It's such a good mimic. I'll catch the related bumblebee mimic in our state and show them to my students. They'll say, that's a moth. Not for sure that's a bumblebee. And you guys know the way to tell the difference, right? You're seeing a bumblebee versus a moth? Wait until it approaches a flower. They hover like a hummingbird at the flower. Bumblebees land on the plant, land on the flower. So if you see it hovering, you know you've got a moth on your hands. You know you've got a sphinx. These guys fly really early. They're a higher elevation moth. So while we're getting into late May, when this moth flies, in its habitat, it's still early spring. Often flies before the snow melts. You're going to still see snowdrifts, and this thing's just going to be coming off. So it feeds on the first flowers of the season, has definitely been noted to really enjoy the dandelions. Just being it's probably just the first really available thing. You see that once other flowers have become available, this moth is starting to get a little worse for wear. But this is one, there are records up at Snoqualmie Pass. There are records by Lake Cushman. So those are places to go find it. This is a fireweed feeder as a larva. Big, black sphinx larva with that hooked tail. That's one way to find it in August, is to look for those guys as well. But Snoqualmie Pass, maybe when we're driving through on a field trip, well, the problem is we drive through in April and May. We drive through at like, what, 8 a.m.? That's too early for this guy to fly. We'd have to do a special trip for this to try to find this guy. But it'd be up at the pass. You just have to go there and spend the day up there with some snowdrifts in sight. You might find this guy. Or girl. All right, one that is definitely, I guarantee you, has confused many of you on a field trip. Euclidia ardita, or ardita, however you want to pronounce it. This is the problem with learning this stuff by yourself. This is an octuid. Has a big, bulky moth with, they're mostly brown, but easily mistaken for a skipper or a dusky wing. I cannot tell you how many times I've been tricked. They almost kind of like flap like a dusky wing does. But then it lands owlet-shaped as far as wings over the back. I look at it, it's got no knobs, like Euclidia again. So spring, we're getting into early summer now. We're going to transition into the summer flyers. So most common east slopes of the Cascades, uncommon western Washington meadows. How many of you have definitely seen this critter when you've caught what you think is a dusky wing, which we're excited when we get dusky wings. They're not all that common. When they do, you have that question, isn't the rare Bacuvius not? How many of you have pulled out a moth? Not that anyone recollects, okay.
Is there anything on that hind wing that we're not seeing that's notably different?
Brown.
Not notably different.
Not notably different, brown. All right, so now we're going to move into the summer moths. So we think summer, we think hot, long days, makes for good long field trips, lots of flowers, especially earlier in the season. And that's when a lot of these moths get going. So A lot easier to find them versus you got to time it just right with the very early spring moths. So we start with a small one again. This is Heliothodes diminutivus, so the size is in the name there. It's a tiny, tiny little thing. Very small, does visit flowers. Lars' website says it especially enjoys flea banes, low elevation dry grasslands. Reeser Creek Canyon, excellent spot to see this. But there's usually so many other butterflies around, you don't pay attention to this less than a 1-inch little moth. But it definitely can reward you. It goes from this kind of golden straw color to it can have this bright pink colors, and it can be even brighter than that. Last photo will show you. Higher elevations, you get the white spotted midget. It's a fun little name. So generally higher elevation meadows, you're talking Hurricane Hill, it's up there. Places around Rainier, other isolated peaks. I'm sure it's much more common than we know because we're just not getting up to some of these isolated peaks. Closely tied to pussy toes, basically for not only as host but as a nectar source. So a little bit of a trade-off. I'll eat some of your leaves, but I'll also pollinate you. Definitely one to look for. So this is, once again, you see how small this critter is. There's someone's fingernail. You think, man.
So is that about 2?
These are both noctuids, yes. Sorry, I keep forgetting that I promised you that. All right, more noctuids. This is where this was borderline for inclusion, but it's such a striking moth. Can you put that broad yellow in it? That I said I got to throw it in here, but it's Columbia Basin in early June. You're talking more toward the Tri-Cities, and even then we don't have a lot of records in Washington. So once again, it's one of those kind of only barely qualified for inclusion based on, I wanted to show you ones that you were likely to see. But I actually think this is probably more common than we think it is. So I just want to put that in your head, that search image. That's a really distinctive moth, is it not? Tiny. Tiny enough, but big enough for a crab spider to go for it. Yeah, big enough for a crab spider to go for it.
That's a really great one.
That scale, is that a centimeter?
Yep. So anything with that kind of gray blue black color is Merrill Peterson's photos on the Pacific Northwest Moths page, and yep, that's the scale, 1 centimeter. So you're talking small moth. So when we go out to the Columbia Basin, the problem is when we go out to the Columbia Basin, it's usually April, because we go to Cowiche Canyon or places like that. We're not getting out there in early June. But something to look out for if you're ever on your way down to the Tri-Cities. So these previously are all related to a large genus called the Shinia moths, the flower moths. And they're aptly named. They're daytime flyers. They nectar very frequently. The problem is a lot of them kind of look like each other. There's more.
That's
So-
the trouble.
What's that?
That's the trouble.
That is the trouble. So, location, as far as habitat, timing, all those things can help. Intermontana is more of a sage steppe moth that flies in May versus Velosa you find up in Mount Rainier in August. So if you were to show me this and say, oh yeah, I found it on the Paradise Trails, I'd say, well, I know it's not Intermontana. Intermontana is a sage steppe critter. But you also might find Vacciniae flying with Velosa because it feeds on blueberries up there. But it's a little bit more distinctive. But
Impossible.
what's that?
Impossible.
Impossible. Oh, he did it.
Yeah,
Cravo did it, but then Cravo's a madman. He's a genius.
I know.
Anyway, but just because you can ID them as species does not mean you still cannot appreciate them. Oh, I'll go back to this. Does not mean you cannot appreciate them. So this is like the more vivid coloration of the diminutivus. That's how bright pink it can get. This is Velosa up at Mount Rainier. So they still give you plenty to photograph, plenty to look at in addition to the butterflies. So even if you can't ID the species, so what? Who cares? They're Shinia moths. They're flower moths. Great to appreciate out there, right?
Is that just a variation, or do they wear their color off or something?
Variation.
Okay.
So we'll go back to diminutivus. So some of them come out, they're kind of more this blackish with some straw color, some of them are kind of pink, and then the one I showed you on the daisy there, that's like an extreme pink variation. So that's variation. These Shinia moths, I call the rabbit brush lovers. They're ones that once again, they're kind of on that borderline of should I include these in this talk or not, because they are generally nocturnal, but they've been found so many times during the daytime at rabbit brush nectaring that I said, we'll include them. All these kind of, tannish, white, brown moths. Look for them late in the season, talking August, September, when rabbit brush is blooming. You'll probably find quite a few of these.
So they're active both day and night?
Mostly nocturnal, but they've been seen enough times during the day that I said, I'm going to include this.
See?
They're not dependably active during the daytime. All right, so now we go to the most basal of moths. So these are the most primitive of all moths. And this one's a relatively new species for our region. So primitive it doesn't have a proboscis. It still has its mandibles.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. And I've only seen it once, and at the very south end of the Lake 22 trailhead, there's a little meadow down there. I was looking for bumblebees. And these guys are tiny. These guys are so tiny. It's reported that they do not move beyond 30 centimeters of their host plant.
Really?
So you think, really poor dispersers. So they do feed on a number of different things. They'll feed on some pretty basal plants like liverworts. They'll also feed on some ferns. They've been found feeding on fungal hyphae.
What are they?
You said feeding on as larvae?
Larvae, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, as
And
larvae.
with the mandibles, what are they feeding on as adults?
I believe pollen. More eating pollen than drinking nectar. So we used to think that it was just E. pardella throughout the region. Said, well, all these Pacific Northwest ones only have 2 spots, whereas pardella has 3. So we now have a new species in our region called Bimaculella. That's the one I found up at Lake 22. So you're thinking June or so. This was June mid-elevation. Keep an eye out for it because remember, it's going to be small and you got to get down low to see it.
About how many millimeters head to tip?
Millimeters.
Sure.
I'll say less than 10.
Okay.
Where is Lake?
So less than 10 millimeters. It's a tiny little thing.
Where is Lake 22?
5 millimeters.
Well,
Lake 22 is on the Mountain Loop Highway, so it's Snohomish County.
yeah.
This is definitely more of an openings in forested habitats. Oh, so here you go. Here's the scale. All right, so we get to the other. How do we pronounce this? Kynergina.
I think it's a Cenergina, but I'm
Cenergina.
not sure about that soft C on the AEs.
All right, so Erectia, or the forage looper, definitely a common day-flying moth across most open habitats. You find it in your yard, you find it out in the middle of the Columbia Basin. Larvae feed on many legumes, especially clover. Go to the same places you might see orange sulfurs in July. Along, say, alfalfa alfalfa fields, you'll probably find this one as well. All right, one of my favorites, Stemnoides marmorata. No common name again, but gorgeous little critter. Also night flying as well, but I found it enough times during the day with multiple individuals flying during the day that it warranted inclusion in this. As well, it is just a stunning little moth. And this is one I love to quiz people with because it does perch with wings up over its back. Butterfly-esque. I said, well, is that a butterfly? No, it's a moth. So predominantly ponderosa sagebrush interface, what I say, as sagebrush is moving into ponderosa forests is where I find this particularly abundant in stands of mountain mahogany, which is what Powell and Oppler report. But I found it Menashtash Ridge, right next to the observatory when Waba goes. I found it up near Sun Mountain Lodge near Winthrop. Tons of places like yeah, I'm sure you'd find this many more places than it is currently known.
Oh.
All right, now who's seen this one?
Seen this one.
I know you guys have seen this one. Even if they say, it's a moth, there's like, what, a moth? I know people are going to look at this, and that's kind of actually a weird color my projector's giving it, to be honest. And it does. So that's more of like a bluish gray on there than what that color's giving it. But regardless, you get red, pink, something along those lines. So this is a non-native moth. It was introduced to control tansy ragwort. And how many of you have seen tansy ragwort out? Okay, so it's not really doing its job. But we have this moth here now. And so long as it stays on tansy ragwort, I say welcome to Washington. So largely restricted west of the Cascades. Larvae are knockout too, feeding largely in groups and also displaying their warning colorations. I mean, tansy ragwort is a plant that kills cattle. And it can feed on and survive, so it is basically telling the birds, do not think about it.
In the family?
Oh, this is another Arctiid. So tiger
So
moth.
it's, sure.
Tiger moth, yep. I know, kind of looks like geometric as far as wing proportions are concerned, but Arctiid. All right, white-lying sphinx moths. These flies anytime, doesn't care, day or night. It does not care. We've seen this going out to WABA conferences at the het area, soaking up what I believe was probably urine. Just hovering above the ground. I've seen it in Las Vegas, feeding from swimming pools. This is basically the moth equivalent of the red admiral or the painted lady. This is an annual migrant that comes from the desert southwest. However, during the warmer winters, some of them can overwinter, just like the red admiral can. So this year, I got quite a few reports early in the season of this. Okay, some of them overwintered this past winter. But given a harsh winter, just like the red admiral, they're pretty much not going to survive. They're going to have to be recolonized from the south. Definitely a lot bigger than a red admiral painted lady, though. How many of you have seen these on our field trips? How many of you have seen the larva?
I've seen them
Seen a couple of the larvae. Their larvae
I've seen
knockout.
them.
Why I didn't include a picture?
different places.
Blame me for that. All right, another sphinx, though. How many of you have seen this one? How many think they've seen this one? Maybe. But yeah, so another bumblebee mimic. Great bumblebee mimic. Actually emerges from the chrysalis with scaly wings, with like scales on the wings. It's actually emerged with a pattern, but then first flight, they're all off. They're all off, and it's got a clear wing. So it's both sides of the crest, usually open meadows and riparian areas. You'd find this out on the islands. You'd find this out. Puget prairies, you'd find it out. Riparian areas east of the Cascades, so Reeser Creek Canyon, we find them. Derby Canyon, all kinds of our field trip locations, we find them. But I will say, rarely is it common. I find maybe 1, 2, 3 a day. 5 was my best day. This one lays its eggs on snowberry, I believe. Does that ring a bell with anyone? Or?
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Snowberry. So, Maris thetis. It used to be called the Finnis, but there's been recent work that has split and says, no, the west of the Rockies is one species, the east of the Rockies is another species. All right, hummingbird clearing moth. Seen only a handful of times in our region, but given we've talked about the bumblebee one, figure we might as well throw this one in there. Most of them have been seen by John Davis down in the Columbia Gorge. Seems to be where most of them end up. But just a handful of times where you may see it's more red than this bumblebee one. Usually a little bit bigger too. Yeah, if you see a red one hovering at a butterfly bush somewhere, you know you've got this much rarer one. If you were to go to the East Coast, this is a much more common moth. Fairly rare this side. All right, one that this has been kind of a conundrum for me. So this is Anarta nigrolunata, the black moon. And once again, why is there no common name? The common name is right in the title, the black moon moth.
You got
So, name for all these black crescents on the underside of the wings. One of them is shown through in the red spot. They kind of show through on the top side, although they become part of the border, or part of the reniform spot. So this is an early flying moth in subalpine, alpine meadows above tree line. Once again, often flying before snow is entirely melted. So it's early spring up there, but it's like July for us. This is what we call summer, but up there, the season is early spring. And the problem is that they tend to do this. They land on rocky soil, fold their wings up, to
Great.
which I'm searching. As soon as I get too close, boom, off it goes, and we're off this whole thing again. So this is a species that I always wanted to see because I always see the photos of this undersegment, and I want to see that. That looks like a really stunning little critter. And I always thought I was seeing these noctuids. This is a noctuid. I always thought I was seeing these noctuids that do not have these black shapes. There's 2 species. And I said, oh, I'll get to them at some point. For some reason, it didn't just capture my imagination like this one did. Come to find out, I finally said, you know what? I'm going to catch one of these. I'm going to figure out what species is flying along this trail. I took it out. I've been seeing it the entire time. The entire time I've been seeing this critter. I just had not taken the time to see it. So once again, you have a guy who knows his day-flying moths, but even I put it on the back burner compared to say, well, I'm not here for butterflies. So this shows you how little we know their ranges and how much more we could know if we just took a little bit of time to learn them. So this is probably the most common one you'll actually see out there that's doing this. I don't need to introduce this one. You guys know this one. Even for those, if I say day-flying moth, this is usually one of the first ones that comes to mind. Even before the first, the western white ribbon carpet of the first of the season, even before the bumblebee clearwing or anything like that. You got elegant sheep moth. This has a number of common names competing, which is why the Latin name is important. You have a ton of common names, only one scientific name, right? I've heard elegant sheep moth. I've heard brown day moth. I don't know how that one got established. I was on a Wagar trip and a little girl said, it should be called the sherbet moth. Like, that's a great name. The sherbet moth. So open forest meadows in the east, prairies and open grassland west, so both sides of the crest, but it's open hot areas, so if you go to the prairies, you're going to see it. July, August, you're talking peak summer conditions. So it is a silk moth, once again, so it does not have a mouth. And so it must find its mate and lay its eggs within the 5 to 7 days it has to live. And it finds those females using those antennae. Among the best sense of smell in the animal kingdom silk moths have. So, does anyone remember this girl?
Yeah, I remember the one with the eggs.
So these were both same trip,
Right.
not the same individual. I did not do that trip.
Those eggs?
Yeah. So I mean, that's the benefit. Why would you give up your ability to feed? Feeding allows you to live longer. Maybe lay a few more eggs, develop a few more eggs. They said, well, if I don't have to feed, I don't have to have all that room for those feeding organs or anything. I can just stuff my abdomen full of eggs. As long as we can find each other quick and I can lay my eggs quick, maximize reproductive potential that way. So I have to thank ants for doing that for me. Because we had found a female being dragged off dead by ants, but they basically already tore her open like, whoa. I didn't realize how packed she was. That is all the way up to the thorax. That is packed.
I have the same picture.
What's that?
I have the same picture.
You have the same picture. But everyone remembers the first part of the, so this was out our second day of the Okanagan area, the Moses Meadows, but the second day. What's that place called? The wildlife area.
It was
Sinlahican, thank you. Sinlahican Wildlife Area. Yeah, you would find this quite a bit. And we found this girl who had just come out of her cocoon. We watched her crawl away to a blade of grass, expand her wings. We all just got a great picture of her. She was very cooperative. But basically, just a little while later, she would have been calling for a male. We would have stuck around there all day. We would have seen the males coming in. They're that quick. All right, so the counterparts to the elegant sheep moth, we have the Hera sheep moth. The problem with seeing this one, sage step, August. You have to really want to see that moth, and trust me, next year, I really want to see that moth. I'm going. But I see its caterpillars a lot. So the caterpillars feed on sagebrush, they feed in groups. So they're usually pretty conspicuous. You'll see these big black ball spiny caterpillars on a branch of sagebrush. Don't touch them. You know what the caterpillars do. Those things sting like stinging nettle. So don't touch them. And then you have the nettle sheep moth, kind of the in-between Herod and Aegleanterina. More juniper woodlands, upper sagebrush. Think about early September as prime time to see this. So lower parts of Reeser Creek Canyon is where you find these guys. It's a good spot to go try to find. All right, still thinking big, still thinking colorful. Ranchman's tiger moth. Anyone remember this one?
Yes.
Our conference down to Dayton. Goldendale, that's it. No, not Dayton. No, Goldendale. Our conference down to Goldendale. We walked along that river with those great rock formations on the side. Tons of these guys out. Tons of them. And so multiple color forms. You got this really orange form and the really black forms. Not restricted to sex that I know of. Not restricted to gender. Just variation. So this is one of the woolly bears. And similar to the sphinx moth, I'm asking myself, why did I include a picture below? I have good pictures. They are related to the woolly bear that we see flying around, except for the woolly bear we see crawling around in early spring. That's a night flyer. This is a day flyer. Wet meadows west of the Cascades. If you're going to live in the east, they need to stay by wet areas, so riparian zones, much like what we found down at Goldendale. But I found the caterpillars in early spring up in the Skagit Wildlife Area. So they're out there. Just any wet meadows you can think of west of the Cascades, try it out. You'll probably find this one. All right. So we have this group of moths that we call the forester moths. And usually it's because they occur in some kind of forested habitat. But they all look superficially alike. But they don't really live together, though. So there's got to be some benefit to being this black and white. And one thought is that they're trying to look like some kind of wasp or a bee, because pretty much all of them have these kind of fuzzy orange socks. Maybe that's supposed to look like pollen baskets? Really not sure. That's the idea. Don't really know. But regardless, you have all these moths that look very similar to each other, yet we have 3 different genuses here. 2 different families. So first one, we'll start with their smallest one, white-spotted sable. So it's the smallest of the lookalikes. Caterpillars feed on goldenrod. Just says woodland openings. So if you go around Gold Creek Pond up at Snoqualmie Pass, I've seen it up there. Tiny. So this is a crambid. This is a cramidae, so one of what's considered to be among the micro moths. Kind of gives you an idea of how small it can be. We have Riding's forester. This is the dry canyon open steppe counterpart. So once again, Menashtash Ridge, places like that. Lars says it's a distinctively slow flyer. Really easy to catch. We have the 6-spotted forester, which is kind of more of the openings in western Washington forest, eastern Washington forest. Feeds on fireweed, so whenever I go out to Big Four Ice Caves, Monte Cristo Trail on the Mount Loop Highway, I see quite a few of these. Males have 8 spots, just to confuse you. We have the 6-spotted forester, and then there's the 8-spotted forester that lives in the East United States. So hence what? So why is that not an 8-spotted forester? Because the females have 6 spots, whereas the females of the 8-spotted forester have 8 spots. So if you see a male, kind of hard to distinguish there. Got to look at the antenna. And then we have Maculox forester. This is kind of more the high mountain meadows. So Sauk Mountain, I find these a lot up in the Sauk Mountain meadows. But once you see those fuzzy orange socks, right? It's superficially maybe see a resemblance to a wasp, but once again, why have all these moths converged to kind of look very similar? There's got to be some advantage to it if multiple species from multiple genus, from multiple families have done it.
Have you ever tasted them?
Not yet.
Okay.
I haven't been there to yet. Nobody's offered me enough money.
Maybe they taste bad, I don't know.
Could be. All right, so not quite as stunning as the foresters, but still a day flyer. The Oregon gem moth. You can see it is on the small side. So there's a centimeter. It's on the small side. Usually this is another high elevation mountain meadows, but once again, I implore, we know very little about their range because it was once found by a Pelham at Fort Lewis. So all the records are high elevation yet Fort Lewis. That's not a high elevation. So this is probably another one where people might see it, people might not see it at all. Not report it, not know what it is. Anyway. Coleophora myarella. This seems, as I said, it seems to be the most commonly collected species of the 158 named species. There's probably many more, and to be honest, when you see one of these in Washington, to be honest, these two pictures might not even be Myrella. So you have to dissect them. But identifying Coleophora is pretty easy. It has scales all up half the antenna. That is fairly easy. They are very small, but they do visit flowers quite a bit. So once again, just go slow, look on the flowers. You might see some. And while this might look a little bit dull, it's because it has the structural iridescence built in that all depends on the angle you look at. So shining in the sun, iridescent bronze. Not a bad thing.
So scaly antennae are unique to the genus or the species? What's
genus.
To the genus.
To the genus. Yeah, so like I said, do not worry about identifying your Coleophora down to species. Because there's 158, and I'm going to say plus. And I'm not even going to take a stab at how you would distinguish it. So just say, hey, cool, I found a Coleophora moth. They're cool little moths. Speaking of another cool little moth that definitely needs to be looked out for, Gyros murei. So not at all shy. I'm thinking maybe morning coloration, because it lands like that. It lands with its wings kind of spread out. It's showing its orange underwing. It's got that red maroonish with white splotches. But it is definitely wary. It's hard to get a picture of this one. The 2 times it's been found in Washington, so once again, I'm breaking my rule of common. The 2 times it's been found locally common, but generally just below peaks in very gravelly, kind of plantless areas. Gravelly soil. That seems to be maybe where they meet for mating, because it says because the two people who have seen them said they were definitely courting. They found some mating, so maybe that's the place that they get together for courtship. But so yeah, look in mountainous areas, particularly near peaks, particularly on bare, rocky, gravelly areas. But definitely a cool little noctuid if you can find it. So one of them was Goat Mountain up near Winthrop, and the other was an unidentified peak near Clayella. Just says Clayella near a peak. Thanks for that. There's a question in the back?
You answered my question.
Oh, good. Wood tiger moth. Really variable. Frustratingly variable. Because you spend all this time in your field guide studying one image, and then you see that. It's wholly different. Same species. So definitely widespread, most common, say wet subalpine meadows. So we've been up to like Cache Prairie. What's the Quartz Mountain? I've seen it. This was up at Whistler Meadows, North Cascades Highway. This was in Moses Meadows while we were eating lunch. Just happened to land on my backpack. It's totally the wood tiger. So this is another tiger moth, another arctiid. It's getting to be a little bit overwhelming now, huh? Just the numbers and the amounts. We're only going through about 50 of these. All right, how many of you have seen this one? Okay, cool. Now we're getting to something that people have definitely seen before. Worst? Yeah, I didn't make the conference. I watched the video. You found a lot of these. I saw that. Worst common name I think on the planet. Police car moth? How'd you get that one?
David James.
It's black and white.
Well, no, and David James didn't create. Did he create it?
He brought it up.
No, yeah, he brought it, but it's had that name for a long time, and I have no idea where they got it from. I like the name bluebell tiger moth because it tells you a little bit about it. It lays its eggs on bluebells. Wet mountain meadows, Cascades, and Olympics, you're thinking high summer, August, that's where they're going. For the longest time we thought, oh, this is definitely trying to look, kind of looks similar to a forester, doesn't it? As far as the same kind of general pattern, even has the orange up toward the thorax. We're thinking, it's got to be distasteful. It flies so slowly, it's so big, I think it's got to be distasteful. Well, this past couple of years, they've been having eruptions in their populations, and John Davis reported he was seeing birds take one after another after another. Or was it John Bauman? It was John Bauman, actually, who said that he was seeing birds just continually take them, so apparently they didn't taste that bad. All right, so we have Diana's, we're going back small again. Diana's Coriolis moth. This is another one of the metal mark moths. Similar, remember that metal mark moth at the very beginning? It was small enough you could see the individual yarrow flowers nectaring on. Same species, same family. Not that shiny. We're used to Pacific Northwest things not being that shiny. We got more of these subtle, nice brown things like we have around here. So I prefer Diana's metal mark moth. But late season avid flowers are definitely small, so that's one of the Dos Astra, I think, on the small side. But once it's sitting there nectaring, it lets you get pretty close for photos. These can go from brown to fairly green, actually. All right, yellow-collared skate moth. Anyone ever seen these? A couple of you. All right. So wet meadows, riparian areas, flies in summer, avid nectar. You're thinking mostly when the time thistles are blooming, that's when this moth is out. So I was doing a bioblitz for the Upper Skagit Indian tribe at Hanson Creek near Cedro-Woolley. And this moth was very common out in those meadows, nectaring on the thistles. So you'll see these sporadically here and there. There is a relative moth called the red-shouldered tenuga. Definitely a knockout. I mean, I don't get me wrong, yellow-collared skate moth's not a bad one. Here it is for comparison. But yeah, that tenuga. Metallic blue abdomen, bright red shoulders and head. Knockout. Little white-tipped wings occasionally. So that one occurs predominantly in coastal meadows, occasionally wet, boggy meadows inland. Kind of place you're thinking I need to wear some, rain boots to, or maybe some hip waders to get into. But what's the place called? I'm trying to remember all these different places we've been to, where each of these are found. Where they release the Oregon silver spot, Cascade Head. You go there, and that moth is definitely flying along with the endangered Oregon silver spots. There are some places also in southwest Washington where you can find the red-shouldered tenuga otherwise, but basically it's a southwest Washington moth. Once you find it, locally common. That's a moth. That's a moth. Trust me, while I was holding it, my brain knew it was a moth. My stomach was turning.
Yeah.
It was the whole, instinctive, you're gonna get stung. So early spring when there's so few around. No. You want to fly when the most are around, so the birds are just going to see, oh, I see that's another hornet, not going to mess with it. But you notice no mandibles. That's what gives it away. It is a rubus feeder, so just about any rubus will do. I'm thinking maybe an ally against the invasive blackberries. Probably not, but hey, if it means we got more of these, I'm for it.
So the rose garden pest.
It is. So raspberry crown borer is what it is its common name. It can reach pest status in raspberry plants. And so this is a member of the moth family Societidae, and they often are wasp mimics, wasp and hornet mimics. And there's a lot of day-flying species, but there's fairly uncommon in Washington that I'm just going to throw in the most common one and say there are others. And a lot of them do reach pest status. There's one called the strawberry crown borer, can be a pest in strawberry fields. There's another one that can reach pest status in currant fields that David James has worked with doing pheromone traps in Yakima. One that has these big old brushy, we call them tail hair pencil thing. I can't remember. They're really kind of cool.
So David, what are the projections that are coming up
Yeah, where's the
That's its
legs
leg.
like that?
That's its mid-leg.
It's standing up above its.
Yeah. I have no idea why it's doing that. And in every other photo I've seen, they're not doing that. So I don't know what mine's doing. Yeah, so just one of those things that scratch your head and say, I better be on the lookout for them. There's something new to discover.
Jeez.
All right, now we're going to move to a very different moth. Anyone ever see the first time I saw it, I didn't know exactly what I was seeing. I emailed Pyle and Pelham and said, look guys, I'm seeing this like maybe 2-inch, very kind of coppery brown thing flying about, maybe double my height, kind of just really flapping and erratically flying through open woodlands. Can't seem to catch it. What am I seeing? Oh, you're definitely seeing the rusty tussock moth. So it comes out about the time woodland skippers appear. Most common west of the Cascades, but can be found east of the crest. What's up?
Have you seen that around Seattle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I've seen that at the Suzzalo Library.
Yes. Oh, they'd be right around here. They're Discovery Park. I saw quite a few of them. When I worked for the Washington State Department of Agriculture, hanging up gypsy moth traps. This is one I made a point of when I got out to no location on the map where I saw them. They're pretty much just about everywhere. So you think in August. When woodland skippers hit their peak, these guys are going. The cool thing, the unique thing about these they're changing around the moth names. I learned these as Lymantridae, but in the family Lymantridae, but now I think they're in some other family now. But the cool thing about this group is that the females are flightless. Look at her wings. Those are her wings.
That's way.
So it's his job to find her. She pretty much lays her eggs within inches of where she emerges as a moth, encases them in a cocoon, and then they spend the winter.
Really? Wow.
And the way they disperse then is that the caterpillars will extend some silk into the air and catch, and they'll do this thing called ballooning. They just kind of sit there on their silk as they're floating away, hoping they don't fall. That's how they disperse, since the female can't fly. But very, very interesting moth. All right, nearing the end. This is one that I was really hoping, if I had time, I would say, look guys, let's do one more butterfly trip before the end. Let's go down to Vantage. Let's go down to the edge of the Columbia River. We did that one year trying to find the Harabuck moth. Weren't successful, but man, were we treated to a bunch of skippers and sulfurs and all kinds of cool late season butterflies. So let's do that one more time, and I'm sure we would see this one. The Sympistus albifasciata. You notice rabbit brush in both photos. I mean, that's a go-to late season. Go find rabbit brush in late season. Host plant unknown. Another one. So why do we know so many of the host plants for butterflies? We can watch them do it. We can watch them lay their eggs. There's quite the list of moths. We do not know what their host plant is because they fly at night. We can't watch them lay their eggs. Daytime moths we're pretty good at, but there's still some where we don't know their host plant. This is one of them. But this is one that we would find flying with the sulfurs and the skippers feeding on rabbit brush. The problem is, I'm working 7 days this week and I can't do it. So somebody take that and do one more butterfly field trip before the season's over. All right, last one. And this is pretty much an all-season moth, to be honest. But I notice most often when its populations reach its peak end of the season. This is the alfalfa looper. Feeds on more than just alfalfa as a caterpillar. But this is from this is an actual quote from the Pacific Northwest Moths website. This moth is so ubiquitous that a map of its distribution is a reasonable map of where moths have been sampled. It's like you say, where have you ever put out a moth trap? And it would pretty much mirror this moth's distribution. So this is one that will fly at night, but also during the day if it wants. I find them a lot in like subalpine meadows, and I think I'm going to find some really cool. This is, by the way, the group. This is an Octua. This is a group that Pelham said they're okay. I like them because of these little sock-shaped stigmas on there. So I'll sample some some up in high alpine meadows up in Mount Rainier and thinking, oh, I'm going to find some like cool high elevation species, take this out, it's Californica again. So the way we distinguish this is that is that they have this little black subapical dash. And the other moths in this group don't have that. That's one very easy way to distinguish Californica from the others. So little marks here.
So looper, I thought that the geometers were doing looper.
So alfalfa looper, you're going to see a lot of geos in looper. The common name looper means squat. This is one reason why I think we should go back and do this, is redo some common names. Because, looper has just been put on a lot of different moths without any consideration for what family it is, any kind of relativity. Looper is meaningless.
For geometers, I think they say looper for the caterpillar because it uses a long.
Yes.
No, I have no idea why they call these.
But that's the name of it on Bug Guide. And I kind of take
it. The way they fly, they kind of.
It could be that too, but as far as looking at common names and you see loopers, that does not mean that this looper is related to another geometry that's called a looper. They're not related. So when you see the name looper, that has nothing to do with taxonomy. Just remember that. All right, so that's the majority of the common day-flying moths you can expect to see on some of our wall I know that's a lot. I would not mind printing this list out if you wanted. I can
Yes.
have it posted somewhere. Yeah, maybe I could get some kind of, even just a PDF going, for like day-flying moth guys or something like that.
That'd be very efficient.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, it'd be good to.
So, what I hope I've convinced you now is that when you see a puddle party of butterflies, that you now don't just look at the moths in there and just go, they're just moths. I hope you now know that, man, that's the next level of butterfly. That could be the next lineage of day-flying leps happening there. Identify the moths. The moths! Not just a moth. You know that they can also be spectacular. The term just a moth is ridiculous. As Maureen asked to point out, so I'm the state coordinator of butterfly and moth records for the butterfliesandmoths.org website. If you are out photographing butterflies and you photograph some of these day-flying moths, submit a sighting. Heck, even if you do the nighttime moths that are sitting at your porch, like, do it anyway. But that's how we're going to get to know more and more of these distributions. You send it to me, I look at it, review it, I say, I can identify it, and it is this, or I will say I cannot identify it.
You want us to set
That's
the
amazing.
pictures of daytime monsters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, like I said, night flying ones too. Do the night flying ones too.
But through the butterflies and moths.
Through the butterflies, so butterfliesandmoths.org. You go into the,
You're going to get a lot.
I'm okay with that.
That's amazing.
You'll see the submit a sighting under the menu, and you can day, location, any other things as far as nectar sources are great for us to know as far as their natural history goes. And then submit your photo, and you're contributing to our knowledge. That way you get tons more cameras focusing on these guys than, so you know the number of bird specialists in the state, right? Compared to the number of butterfly specialists. And then compared to the number of moth specialists. So there's so few people here. The fact that I've gotten everyone say, okay, I'll put my camera on that, I've probably doubled the number of people watching moths tonight.
So what are all these up here?
So these are just a few of the specimens I have of some of our day flyers. You are free to come up and look at them closely if you want.
Yeah.
Just so that they...
Black one.
What's that?
Black,
Which one? This is that red-shouldered tenuta.
oh, so it's got red and
Yeah. If you look at it just right, we don't have really the right lighting here, but you'd see the iridescent blue eye.
David, if we had a field trip to find day-flying moths, is it likely that we would actually find enough that it would really be a fun field trip? Or are they just kind of not enough of them around that there's more butterflies to be seen than
Here's the
moths would
thing.
be frustrated.
That's
If you're,
amazing.
here's the thing, if you're going on a butterfly trip, you're going on a day flying moth trip. You're flying in the same places, same time. Certain species will fly a little bit differently. So for example, we did the one, we talked about this one. So they're mostly old records. It probably still flies, but it'd be March. You have to go down to the oak area. This is probably be among the only left you'd see. So that'd be a special one you have to go make a trip for. But we also make a special trip to go see Sheridan's hair streak, right? But there's still a few of those. But I'm saying we go to Reeser Creek Canyon, we go to Derby Canyon, we go to Menashtech Ridge. There are always day flying moths out there, always. So we don't have to make a special trip for day flying moths. You just say, well, let's not ignore the day flying moths. Let's net them, someone photograph them, send them to Pomona.
The only surprising thing that I've ever seen a moth do that we didn't show tonight is mudding.
Oh yeah, these guys totally do.
Yeah, I once found a whole muddy area and it was all moths.
I've seen mudding areas along the Mount Loop Highway where there are probably 100 of these guys.
Yeah.
It was just them.
Do you know an easy way to tell those apart? Hotshot and summershot?
I went through that, so the wing variation overlaps between species, and nope, you got to dissect them.
In the old books, they say you can use such and such a method, but no.
Yep, no, you got to dissect these guys, unfortunately. Or, I mean, now they have the DNA barcoding now. That might be an easier method.
That's what I was gonna ask. So for the species that specializes in oaks, is that Gary oaks, or is it?
So it'd be Gary Oaks here. Gary Oak that's our only oak in Washington.
That's the only oak we have
So-
native in
so
Washington,
that-
or naturalized, that we don't have natural.
So that being
Well,
said,
sort of,
yeah, that being said, this moth goes all the way down to California, so it probably uses multiple oaks. But up here, that's the way oak it is available, that is available for it, so it definitely does use Gary Oak, but it probably uses more down south.
Or introduce oaks?
Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah,
I hear that at least some of the tiger moths have a countermeasure for bat echo-ranging. Is that for the whole group or just select one?
Good question. So some moths, so how do I say this?
It's amazing.
Many moths have the ability to hear. Butterflies do not. When you think of a butterfly's main predators, so spiders are a main predator of both. Spiders don't make any noise. Birds do not make noise when they hunt, right? Sure, they make noise when they're proclaiming territory and all that kind of stuff, but they don't make noise when they hunt. No real reason for a butterfly to hear. A moth's main predator, bats. So they have to hear. And there's even mites that live in the ears of bats. Live in the ears of moths, but natural selection has been so unforgiving that now the mites only live in one of the moth's ears. Because it's like, I don't want to deafen my host. If the host dies, I die.
Yeah.
But that being said, so these are relatively recent introductions. So there's been a study on the white striped black. Still has its ears. Pretty big ones at that. They're on the sides of their body. So not like that, but no, on the sides of their body. But anyway, so going back to Al's question. So some tiger moths, the night flying ones, some are able to jam the bat sonar from going back, and some of the noxious ones are actually able to emit their own sonar back to the bat in a specific pattern that now the moth, similar to say a bird eating a monarch butterfly and associates that orange and black butterfly with being distasteful, the bat now hears, oh, that particular pattern, I've tried that before, that was nasty, so I'm not going to eat it again.
Well, I just realized
So I don't know if that's across all tiger moths, but definitely some of the ones around here that are distasteful definitely do that.
Yeah, I had read that they essentially jam it by emitting very high-pitched, rapid pulses of their own.
They can jam it and some can send their own pattern back.
Interesting stuff.
Well, I just didn't know much about anything about these things and about their food sources. And obviously, where they are has a lot to do with just like the butterflies. Is that correct?
Just like butterflies.
Is it like them? They have special, are they more particular in their...
There are some generalists, there are some specialists, there are endemics, there are widespread species. I mean, you talk about I noted a number of different kind of counterparts. Like, hey, this is kind of like the echoazor of the moth world. This is kind of like the painted lady of the moth world. There's a ton of different kind of counterparts to be made, like a ton of different comparisons. So, much the same needs, much the same habitat uses, food resources as butterflies. I mean, you're going to see some different ones.
Specific, do you understand with a lot of the moths what they like to do? Or you're just looking at where you see them?
So most of this is just where we've seen them. So a lot of it is because identifying them is more difficult than, say, a butterfly because the resources aren't there. A lot of people are satisfied with, I got a name.
Yeah.
And that's enough of a challenge for a lot of people. Now that we're getting to that point where, okay, more people are learning the names, now it's, okay, let's sit down and let's see, are there any preferences? Do they have preferences as far as nectar sources? Do they have preferences as far as habitat uses? All kinds of stuff like that, because there are endangered species of moths. And we know next to nothing about their ecology compared to some of our endangered butterflies. I mean, Taylor checker spot is probably among the most studied organisms, probably among the most studied invertebrates, and yet our last speaker who talked about the feeding on the plants relative to what the paintbrush was using as its host and all those effects, because he's revealing how little we know about even those insects. And those are among the most studied of the arthropods. So now that we're getting to a point where we can find names, and I say now it's the added challenge of let's really look at their life history.
You know a lot, buddy.
That's the problem, is the more you know, the more you know that you don't know.
I want to take a look at that. Don't put it away.
Oh, yeah.